Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. So yesterday there were a few sessions about crossing bridges, and we're trying to build a bridge here, building software out of Europe, and we plan to add to that international theme today. In the next 25 minutes, we hope to leave with you a few insights into what we see as huge opportunities for startup growth across two large markets, and particularly how a company might unlock value by crossing the Europe-ASEAN bridge. For those of you in the audience who are not familiar with ASEAN, it is an acronym for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and the main 6 countries are Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam. So what you can see up here actually is some classical British architecture. And some of you that live in the UK might recognize a couple of the buildings. But we can play a little game, right? We'll keep it light after a heavy Russia session. Can anyone guess how many of these are actually in the UK? 0. Well, the correct answer is 2. Sorry, I don't have any prizes. I don't think anyone actually got it right. These 2 are famous landmarks in Singapore, a reminder of the shared heritage and history that both countries have, and this dates back almost 200 years. We won't do the same game again, but these are familiar buildings that represent Dutch architecture. Again, not every landmark here is actually in the Netherlands. These 2 are in Jakarta, Indonesia. You're probably getting a sense of where I'm headed at this point, but bear with me while we, look at a few more pretty pictures. On this page, we have a few famous French landmarks, but yet 2 of them are in Vietnam. Last but not least, we cannot forget about the heavy Spanish influence that is prevalent throughout the Philippines, and Spanish culture even permeates the Filipino language. It's clear that Europe and Southeast Asia have strong historical ties, and we at BPI think that we need to revive these connections to supercharge the next wave of technology companies. Now just imagine if we could combine the top 10 cities in Europe and the top 10 cities in ASEAN. You would have metrics that rival the top 10 cities in the US and the top 10 cities in China. And in fact, we did this quite recently. I was quite surprised that we're not actually lagging the US much, and we're way ahead of where China is at the moment. With this combination of Europe and ASEAN markets, we would have an access to a large pool of skilled labor, young, vibrant companies that are not trying to grow into sky-high valuations or face intense competition in the US. They don't need to worry about unexpected shifts in policy that might destroy your business overnight, such as education in China or some of the big tech companies, Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba. So bear with me, I know we are a VC after all, so I have to have one chart. 2021 saw a record year of funding in both Europe and Southeast Asia, but this is a fraction of the funding that companies get in the US and in China. Even with COVID and the sell-off in growth stocks, capital flows in the first quarter of 2022 already suggest that this will be another strong year for Europe and Southeast Asia. On a relative value basis, $1 of capital spent in Europe or Southeast Asia has the potential to outperform the US and Chinese markets. So we believe that we're reaching or have reached about the golden age of startups in Southeast Asia. And in 2021, a number of high-profile companies went public. And we expect this trend to continue this year. There's a lot of room to grow outside of Singapore. GDP per capita numbers are only about 20% of their developed market counterparts. So let's talk a bit about specific examples. Several of you might have the TransferWise or Wise app on your phone. They expanded into Southeast Asia about 3 years ago. And perhaps a critical part of their expansion was the fact that they chose a good local partner, a neobank in Singapore called Aspire. Conversely, some of you might be aware that Shopee, which is the e-commerce platform backed by Sea, was trying to expand in Europe only a few months ago. Unfortunately, within 2 months, they exited France. Maybe if they had partnered with a local firm, they would have had a bit more success. Which brings me to my final page. And I think this is a nice segue into starting our conversation with Luca. But obviously, I want to congratulate Luca for now growing Habyt into the largest co-living platform in the world. And of course, now as part of our portfolio with the acquisition of Hamlet. So Luca, can you tell us why Southeast Asia is so important for Habyt?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So I think most recently I was checking some data, and I saw that someone put a dot on the map right near Singapore, I think between Singapore and Cambodia. And if you draw a big circle that is around 3,000 kilometers of radius, you actually have more people living inside that radius than living outside of that radius, which is completely insane, right? And so if you want to build a very important company, I would say that for any company that wants to build a global brand, a global consumer product, is very, very important to have access to such a massive demographic. Not only, of course, ASEAN and Singapore and the proper Southeast Asia, but let's also remind ourselves that for companies that are in Europe, and Habyt was born in Berlin, and we have very, let's say, European DNA. Singapore is also sort of a landing pod sort of for China, potentially, for India. They are two of the largest markets, for Japan, right? So it's not only about the Southeast Asia, but also about having a space that is 3, 4, 5 hours maximum of flight away from these very large sort of business centers that are sort of leading into massive economies and so on. Why was it also, let's say, very important to us as a housing company, as a digital sort of brand and consumer product to enter into Singapore, specifically for us as a company? So we offer a simple, beautiful, and community-driven housing product where people can access, very easily, and also move between places. And it's actually targeted towards young professionals. And when you look at the growth in certain areas of the Southeast Asia, such as, for example, Indonesia, and you see it's the 4th largest country in the world, huge growth in terms of the millennial population and the urbanization, people moving into the cities, then it becomes kind of a must, right, to have a presence, to enter and to develop into these markets if you want to target that demographic. So we actually decided to make this move and decided to partner with a company locally. There was Hamlet, and yeah, now we have a presence in Southeast Asia.
Excellent, excellent. And maybe you could share a little bit. I'm sure in part of your process, you looked at many different competitors, right? Why did you pick Habyt maybe over some others?
Yeah,
sorry, Hamlet.
Yeah. So, well, I think for any, let's say, companies, as you mentioned, you mentioned that it's always better to enter with a good partner into such, let's say, faraway market. And I think Julien also is going to explain how they partner with the local companies for their venture portfolio. And so for us, what we looked at, let's say, specifically into choosing Hamlet was number one, the size. So we always, because of the size of the business now, with thousands of units across 10 countries, we need to enter with at least a minimum size. And when you look at the size, the amount of markets, the amount of units that Hamlet had in their portfolio, it felt like the most natural partner to enter in terms of getting together with the biggest player in the region. And secondly, what we looked at was the quality and availability of the partners that we had by entering the market with this company. So of course, Burda, which makes the bridge between Germany and Europe and Southeast Asia, but Habyt was also supported by a couple of other players locally, a bunch of real estate players, but also most importantly Mitsubishi, which is the largest private owner of real estate in Japan, with which Habyt has a joint venture in Japan, so that will allow us to grow within that massive region, with a very, very strong partner. And secondly, also Sequoia India, which is also a very important fund out of Bangalore, which again gives you access to not only their Southeast Asian portfolio and partners, but also to India if at any point we want to enter that market. So first, let's say size. Second, the partners. And the third, last but not least, I would say even more importantly, is always the people, right? So we want to have local team that is able to scale, that has no ego in doing so, right? So that they're looking at the mission first. And we found in Giselle and the team in Singapore from Habyt the best partner to scale at this stage. So we decided to go on with them. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And maybe just a final one. Are you, a little bit concerned at all about what's happening in the markets, geopolitical tensions? Are you going to push ahead with growth, or are you going to be a little bit more conservative? Tell us about your vision.
Yeah, I think we've been pretty conservative so far. As in, the company is about 5 years old, but already at a large size and very close to the profitability line. So I think we're pretty solid, and we'll probably continue with, let's say, healthy growth as much as we've done until now. I think that the expansion to Southeast Asia, if anything, provides a hedge, towards potential, even political risk in Europe. And therefore, we want to continue to grow the business, at least in these two macro regions, for the foreseeable future. We do believe, and I think everybody here will be aware that the markets will be a bit shaky for the upcoming, maybe 12 to 24 months. So we'll be aware of it, and we'll try to maintain, let's say, a very good runway and decide, very consciously on which growth projects to take on. But we will definitely continue to grow because we've done so quite sustainably so far. So there is no reason to stop now.
Excellent, and we hope to continue our long partnership.
Thank you.
Julian, if I might turn to you, Eurazeo has been very successful, I think, across many asset classes, across markets, but particularly for you, you run the Smart Cities funds in Singapore, and you focus a lot on bringing European companies to Asia with the help of partners. Could you talk a little bit about, the success that you have and how we can share the audience going forward, how you continue to do this?
Yep, sure. Maybe just a question to the audience. How many of you guys have worked in Southeast Asia before? Okay, I'm looking. Okay. Not going to say any nonsense. But it's an important question because it can seem far, but at the same time, a bridge means there's opportunity, and why are we crossing this distance, right? So at Eurazeo, one of the reasons we're there is we're multi-global. So we're present in 10 countries, 12 soon. And one of the things that we can do, we're supporting 300 entrepreneurs, and most of them are in Europe, is help them find new opportunities outside of Europe. And I think one of the prevalent themes of DLD, since yesterday I've been hearing a lot about it, it's a good time for Europe. And European companies, as they're scaling up in their growth mode, they do need to find new terrain. The US is sometimes challenging. Latin America is interesting, and Southeast Asia is definitely a very bright spot. So it's a very good time for European companies that are scaling to think about, okay, what are we going to do beyond Europe, and how can we become a global franchise? And that's kind of how the story started for us. We're supporting 300 entrepreneurs today, and I think there's around 30 right now that we've localized into Southeast Asia, into China, Korea, Japan, where we have offices. So it's not the majority, I'd say, of our companies that are there, but the success rate has been quite good. So I think that's one thing to remember. Second thing to remember is there's local companies. I mean, in the audience, you'll see there's local entrepreneurs from Southeast Asia here. It's not like you're going into a blue ocean. There is local competition. There's definitely great entrepreneurs. But why is there an opportunity for European companies nonetheless? And I think here it's quite interesting to see that a lot of our companies that have done really well have been B2B. And the local markets in Southeast Asia, it's been fueled, and we saw it, GDP per capita growth, definitely a very quick embrace of digital technologies going, leapfrogging mobile and all the services that enabled. A legacy in education, in financial services and health that's been quite weak. And so startups have been a perfect conduit to kind of fill in that space and provide a better experience to many who actually weren't receiving these services. So there's been a jump in Southeast Asian categories, but what about the B2B? What about the technologies that Southeast Asia and other countries beyond in Asia need in mobility, advanced mobility, in renewable energy, in building services? Here, Europe has a great opportunity, and our companies have come in, a lot of them in B2B. So if I can share examples from Munich, one company that we supported, we're not even an investor, but we supported them in Southeast Asia, a company called Mobility House. They do vehicle to grid. We connected them to one of our LPs, which is Singapore Power. Singapore Power is the electric retailer of Singapore. They need to stay ahead in their sectors. They need technologies that are not available in Southeast Asia. They can turn to China, they can turn to Japan, they can turn to Europe and to the US, and they do. And here we help the Mobility House come into Singapore, help essentially the Singapore grid, enable vehicle to grid, means cars connecting into the grid, consuming and injecting. That's one example. Second example is, again, in the last 2 years, French company we're supporting, it's called We Maintain, so it's in the built environment. And here again, completely blue ocean opportunity. What these guys are doing, they started in Paris, then they went to London. Third market has been Singapore, is essentially better maintenance service for buildings. And maintenance has been done very poorly. It's very costly. You can digitalize it. You can do it with a lot of data, actually. And that's what We Maintain did in Paris, London. And they realized, well, where in the world do we have the highest number of elevators running? It's Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, obviously in Japan. So there's a huge opportunity. Are there any incumbents? None. So that's where there's a very good sweet spot for European companies. It's B2B in these more technical areas. Certainly I've been deploying a fund called Smart City Services. So it's around data-driven services that make cities consume less resources, that enable more livable cities. And there's a nice opportunity there, and we've been pursuing it. And I think there's more to come ahead.
Excellent, excellent. You talked a little bit about European companies coming to Asia. Are there any examples where, in the near future, perhaps some of these companies in Asia might be able to export knowledge, technology to Europe?
So it's happening. Historically, we support also companies in mainland China, and I'll give you one example. We're supporting a company that's called WeRide. In 3 years, has deployed autonomous taxi, autonomous vans, autonomous electrical buses, and it just launched robo city sweepers, meaning city sweepers that are fully autonomous, in 4 years. And these are all operating. They have a cost advantage. They're produced by Yutong, and they're starting to not only sell in China, but they're selling into Dubai, into Kazakhstan, and now Northern Europe. So that's on the China front. Southeast Asia is a little bit more complicated because the ecosystem is younger. There's so much need to already cover, in Southeast Asia that I think most of the entrepreneurs are focused there first. And once they IPO, like Shopee, or they have the resources to do it. Nonetheless, there's a few bright spots. We've seen a company based out of Singapore that's doing software for building construction. It's a company that we're not supporting as an investor, but it's done that. Its second market after Southeast Asia has been in Europe, and they recognize that the kind of clients they're serving in Asia, they can also serve in Europe. So I think there's less examples. One of the biggest question marks for the future is talent. One of the constraints in Southeast Asia is that there's technical talent is not as rich as maybe in some markets. So where do you find it? And I think some of the companies in Southeast Asia have been quite nimble. They can be based in any of the metropolitan cities, and they will find talent in other countries. But there's a big question mark as, can we also work with talent in Europe? Can we work with talent in the US? And it's going to be needed as it's truly is a booming digital economy now.
Thank you, thank you. So I think we just have a couple minutes left. Maybe at this point, we'd love to open it up to the audience if there are any questions. I think one in the back there.
Thank you. 1, 2. So Singapore is known to have some very strong technology-based universities. How are you actually using that in your processes?
Yeah, so I'll touch on that quickly. So Singapore is actually a leader globally in certain fields. One which is not very well known is materials. It's very, very strong in materials. It's considered as one of the best in the world. And Singapore does want to build capacity in deep tech very strongly. And it is challenging for certain because these companies take time. But there's a nation-building effort there that's going to continue, and there's no doubt about it. The other is how Singapore can be a window for smart cities. And I think it's quite funny because it looks like a smart city has every aspect, but it isn't yet smart. It consumes still a lot of resources per capita, and I think it wants to do a lot there. The good thing is that there's sandbox opportunities. Singapore's been very, very good in providing the right kind of visas for tech entrepreneurs, facilitating. It's one of the easiest places to start a business in the world. Sandbox opportunities to start. And then for companies like Luca's, the ability to have talent that is very multicultural and very comfortable in working with other types of. So I think that's quite good. But maybe Luca, I don't know what your experience has been so far.
No, definitely. I can tell you, I think for all the Germans here, running a business in Singapore, it's easier than in Germany. There's definitely less bureaucracy. So no, I think I see a lot of the points that Julien mentioned. I think it's easier and it's definitely more prone to accept international culture. I think there is also maybe something that is not known is also how Singapore also protects the local people, right? You need to have a specific amount of local people, local directors and so on, which I think it's a good blueprint, for other markets to not be sort of overtaken, then only by expats and no local people to have jobs. So I think it is definitely a good blueprint for technical and non-technical people to go to work in, and yeah.
And maybe just to leave you guys with one last thing. If you want to come to Singapore and work, Hamlet has 800 rooms available. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Give it a round.